Let us get to the co-main event, which is in the women's bantamweight division, as we have Norma Dumont coming in at minus 240. She goes up against Jocelyn Edwards, who comes in at plus 205. Now, Dumont has taken significant action as she was closer to about minus 160, minus 170 late last week. Now she finds herself at minus 240. Now, she's on a solid winning streak of her own now. She's 6-0 since that loss that she had against Macy Chiasson. That was a split decision loss. But now she's rallied back with, I believe, 6 straight wins. Like I said, each of those wins by decision. And since her knockout loss in her debut against Megan Anderson, all 10 fights for Dumont have hit the scorecards. And I think that's kind of working against her here in terms of establishing herself more so as a title challenger. And I think that's why the UFC continues to give her a slow build here, even though she's 35 years old. She has good Muay Thai. She has good striking. She can be very aggressive and demanding in the clinch and grappling game. But the funny thing is, we've seen her outstruck. We've seen her outgrappled as well. Even her win against Ketlin Vieira, very, very close round. Close fight, actually, all around. Round 1 was clearly in favor of Ketlin Vieira. Round 3 was clearly in favor of Norma Dumont. But round 2 was very close. When I watched it live, I really expected Vieira to have gotten her hand raised when the scorecards were read. But 2 judges thought Dumont did enough in round 2 to actually secure the win. The last minute and a half of that round had Vieira in top position, landing solid damage after a competitive 3.5 minutes for that round. But either way, Dumont was still able to get the win. She was scheduled to fight Yana Santos this weekend, who's also having a solid run in her career as well. But now she gets a short notice, Jocelyn Edwards. She takes on Jocelyn Edwards, who's streaking in her own right. 4 straight wins since that loss to Eileen Perez, but she's been finishing all of her opponents as well. She was able to get that 3rd round submission over Tamiris Vidal. She was able to pick apart Chandler and get that knockout. Same thing in the Priscilla Cachoeira fight. And then she was able to exact her revenge against Nora Kernol in the 2nd round of their fight, where she slammed her and then eventually got that submission to force the tap. But I believe Kernol dislocated her shoulder, broke her collarbone. I don't know what it was, but it was a, very nasty submission from Edwards, slam that led to that, she probably would have got a TKO had the referee stepped in, but the referee was giving Cornell enough time to recover, and then Edwards just slapped on the rear naked choke to force the tap there. But Edwards has significantly improved since earlier in her career. Before, she used to be like a kickboxer that would just stay at distance and try to utilize her volume. She had a mediocre submission game off of her back, but she could be easily grinded out in a lot of those positions. However, I believe it's since she started working with Valentina Shevchenko, specifically for those Alexa Grasso fights, where we saw her really start to get more so to a grappling game. Once she gets to her grappling, she's very good in terms of finding dominant positions and then looking for submissions to get her opponents out of there. We saw her struggle a little bit in that 1st round against Nora Kernol to get that fight to the ground, but she eventually stuck to her game plan in round 2, and it proved fruitful for her to eventually get that finish there. She's an educated kickboxer, and she has a very much improved grappling game, which I think is leading to this amount of success for her to go out there and try to get these wins and find herself in a big spot opportunity, just as she does this weekend. Now, she stepped in for Yana Santos, and this is a fight, if she's able to get the win over Dumont, where she asserts herself amongst the top of the bantamweights and could be fighting for a #1 contender fight in her next matchup. Now, let's talk about how these women match up against each other. On paper, and even before I researched this matchup, I'm like, Dumont probably goes out there, utilizes her strength, drags Edwards to the ground, and tries to just smother her. But upon rewatching that Ketlin Vieira fight, it was very surprising as to, in certain spots, how easily it was for Vieira, a striker, to get Dumont to the ground as much as she did and grind out a lot of those positions. Pre-fight, Dumont always looks like the better side. She, again, good Muay Thai, doesn't throw a whole lot of output for my liking, but she has the strength to really muzzle opponents in the clinch or on the mat when she can do that as well. But it looks like as she takes steps up in competition, it's harder for her to look as dominant as she had compared to earlier in her winning streak. In this matchup, she would be very well suited to try to drag this fight to the ground and keep Edwards on her back, similar to what Eileen Perez did. But I believe Edwards has learned a lot from that Perez loss, and I think she can, throw up submissions. I think she can stay active with reversals, scrambles, get-ups, and then on the feet, she could potentially be the better striker, at least in terms of throwing volume and output. She might be able to stick Dumont from distance, right? I believe Edwards only has a 1-inch height advantage, but she has a 3-inch reach advantage. A lot of that will be exaggerated with her kicking game, and she might have a damn good chance of actually springing the upset here. So much so that I'm actually willing to go out on a limb here and take Edwards. I think that it will be competitive early as Dumont looks to implement her strength, her wrestling. She's going to look to bully Edwards. But I think Edwards will stay busy with throwing up submissions, creating scrambles, maybe looking for reversals. And then when they're back on the feet, I think Edwards will show a good enough aggression game, whether it's mixing in the clinch, mixing in takedowns, or even volume of her own, that's going to catch Norma Dumont off guard. Now, when I studied this fight, Edwards was at plus 140, and I was happy with that number. But to get her now at plus 205, I think it's an even better number for her to really muster up a lot of success and pull off the upset. I think Dumont, her current run is making her look a little bit overrated. Again, she looked really good against Irene Aldana. The issue is with Aldana, way too hittable. The Germaine de Randamie fight. De Randamie, a skeleton of what she used to be earlier in her career. It took her 3 rounds to get Chelsea Chandler out of there compared to Edwards, who was able to knock her out in the first round. Carol Hossa just did not show up against Dumont and was way too passive in that matchup. Edwards can be a very tough stylistic clasher for Dumont, which is why I'm willing to go out there and take Edwards. And I think she sticks with her aggressiveness here, and it leads to her getting a submission win as well. So give me Edwards, and Edwards by submission.